welcome back to another review, and this time we are continuing the Transformers IDW Collection Volume 3, and this time we're talking about the 6-issue arc following Escalation called Devastation. So at the end of Escalation, we had Megatron saying, "Get me Six Shot," and then we read a whole bunch of spotlights, we detailed some of who Six Shot was, and then this story opens with Six Shot coming to Earth and then just dealing with that, and basically what happens is devastation. There's just lots and lots of devastation all throughout this whole story. I was talking to Eric. He called me, we were just on the phone for a while, and we were talking about Transformers at some point, and I told him I got the first 3 IDW collections, and I told him what was in them. And he started laughing, and he says, you got the 3 trades that start bad and end bad. And he's right. I loved Escalation. I liked Infiltration. I love all the spotlights. I love Stormbringer. But we opened this review series with Megatron Origin, which is terrible, and we end it with Devastation, which is incomprehensible. I don't know what's happening. Okay, there's an interview with Grant Morrison. I promise, last side story. There's an interview with Grant Morrison where someone asks him a question about Final Crisis, and he's like, well, did you get this? He's like, yes. Did you get this, this, and this? And he says, yes. And he says, did you get this? And he's like, yes. And then Morrison's like, well, then you got the story. That's not what this is. This is, there are events going on that I acknowledge are happening and I remember, and I still don't know what the hell is actually going on. It's just such a weird, jumbled story, and it's a shame because it started really well. So, essentially what we have with this story is, the way Escalation ended with the defeat of Optimus Prime and him going off and trying to figure out what was going on with Nova Prime and meeting Omega Supreme and all that, that factors into this. The whole thing with Sunstreaker and the fact that he was captured and they don't know what to do with him is factoring into this. Nightbeat is more prominent in the first issue where he's talking about, okay, this is where we started, this is where we are now, reviewing all the information we have so far, and it's actually a pretty good recap page of all the events thus far. There's the Machine Nation, that's one faction, is the Machine Nation. Then there's like the facsimile stuff, and then there's the Decepticon stuff, and the stuff that we saw with Sunstreaker feeds into the Machine Nation stuff, and some of those things I attributed to the Decepticons in the previous review when I was talking about the humans armed with technology is kind of bleeding into the Machine Nation stuff, and so like the factions are really all over the place, and some are interconnected and some are not. We found out here that the reason they were able to capture Sunstreaker is that they've been monitoring the Autobot base for a while. And so then Six Shot arrives, and Optimus is just like, okay, we've been compromised, we need to move a location, so they take Arc 19 and they fly off, and then Six Shot shows up, transforms, knocks them out of the sky, and then it's basically just Ratchet on the run from Six Shot. Until he's able to get to the bay and find the rest of the Autobots, at which point it's Autobots all lined up in formation going after Six Shot. And it's really cool. And in the meantime, a couple of Transformers on the side are going to try and find Ironhide, who's about to be crushing it up after being damaged in the previous arc. And they're being chased by a legion of Sunstreaker cars, like 4 or 5 Sunstreaker cars. And they find out that these things are actually Transformers being controlled by humans, and they call themselves the Headmasters. And then you cut to the end of like the 2nd or 3rd issue, and you see Hunter, who's been captured with Sunstreaker in the previous arc that we talked about, and he's been like experimented on and turned into a Headmaster, and he finds Sunstreaker, and Sunstreaker is this head with missing eyes and missing pieces. Imagine what Megatron looks like in Transformers Animated. That's what he is. And then he's like barely able to speak coherently, and he's like, "Please kill me." It's really dark. It's really interesting. It's a great way to bring headmasters back into the game. It's a great way to just make everything feel like all hell is breaking loose. The Autobots Arc 19 is gone. Six Shot is just decimating them. Hunter has just been completely altered into something that is not even human as far as we can tell. And Sunstreaker's just sitting there being basically technologically raped. It's crazy. And it really is devastation. And then on the side, we have Ravager and Laserbeak, who were found along with Dinobots and Shockwave by the government. And Laserbeak and Ravager are being controlled, but then they're getting a signal call from Soundwave, who we see in some kid's house that bought the Soundwave radio in 1984 from the Soundwave Spotlight. So all of that's going on. And then in Megatron's faction, there's a couple of people that want to go against his leadership and against Six Shot and all that. And so they take Starscream, who was completely decimated by Megatron at the end of Infiltration, who's been in a regeneration chamber the whole time, and they're going to wake him up. And then they're going to open that up. And so everything is going nuts. And then on top of that, as that's happening, we have the Reapers that we met in Spotlight Six Shot, those like weird Transformer hybrid things that wanted Six Shot to join them. They show up and start obliterating the Decepticons to the point where Six Shot has to be recalled to go and fight them, and where Arc 32, I think it is, I'm not actually sure off the top of my head, I think it's Arc 32, is in space, and they have to beam the Autobots out of the way, and then when they do that, Verity and the other human guy whose name I can't remember were space-bridged, or beamed up, space-bridged kind of, into Arc 19, and then they die because the technology is just too much for their body, and their death is like a panel. There is just so much going on. And by the end of it, I have no idea. Like, by the end of this, I have no idea anymore. Scorponok shows up, who's apparently been in charge of this Machine Nation thing the whole time, and Hunter has turned into his headmaster form and is linked up with Sunstreaker, and he's about to take on Scorponok, and that just stops. And then Ratchet revives the humans, I think, and then that just stops before we confirm it. And then Starscream shows up and helps the Decepticons by deactivating Six Shot somehow. And then Galvatron shows up, and he's working for now Nemesis Prime, and he doesn't want the Decepticons defeated yet because Earth is valuable, so he starts obliterating the Reapers. And then Optimus Prime is just like, screw it, we're gonna leave Earth, and so they transport up, and the story just stops. That's the best summary I can give you. And while all of this is going on, this big massive battle, the Transformers are now public knowledge. People have seen the Ark fall out of the sky. People have seen, with newscopters, the Autobots going up against Six Shot. They don't know what's happening, but the Transformers have to be public knowledge now. There's just no way. And they confirm it in the book. There is a character that says, we know what's happening now. We see newscopters showing off this fight footage, so people are freaked out naturally. The Transformers are in the air. And then by the end of it, we have the military trying to weaponize Grimlock, which we pick up on next time with Spotlight Grimlock. And everyone just kind of escalating their war as far as humanly possible, to the point where we're done away with phases now. We don't need Phase 6ers or Phase 5 or any of that. We're just going to full-on attack the Earth, and everything goes nuts. And by the end of the story, everything is still nuts, and I don't know. It doesn't feel like there's a coherent ending to this. It doesn't feel like there's a coherent through line throughout this. The miniseries format for this has been really interesting because it's been building by phases. And with Devastation, with the Decepticons abandoning their phase plan, everything is just happening all at once. And I have a very hard time seeing any of this as naturally connecting into each other. I know we set up Galvatron, but he just shows up here, and I still have no idea what's up with Nemesis Prime. And then the Machine Nation stuff is here, but the military characters in this are just mostly just so imperialistic, and they just want everything under their control. It's all military-industrial complex kind of thing. But then I don't know if the Machine Nation's like military. Well, the military's there and the Machine Nation's there, and I don't know how separate those entities are. So much of this makes sense when you go and read the Transformers Wikipedia. I am telling you right now, while I'm talking about this video, there will be comments below that say like, okay, well here is the faction breakdown, and they're going to link me to the Transformers Wiki. If you go to the Transformers Wiki, what is going on here is outlined. If you just read this story, if you read the first 2 collections of IDW comics in the order they suggested, and then read everything up to this point in the order they suggested, and then get to this story, and only take these stories that are progressing as what's going on, you can't draw any conclusions whatsoever. There will be tons of references on the wiki page about, okay, we find out this, this, and this within Devastation issue 3, 4, or 5. And all of that's cleared up later, and by outside sources, and by writers explaining what happened. Just the story by itself explains very little, and it's very hard to know what's going on in any given moment. The ideas of all these factions happening at once is interesting, but I feel like they escalated way too quickly. I like the idea of Optimus Prime just considering Earth like a lost cause, and that he is a general in a war and he can't just be tied up in one place this whole time. But a lot of that doesn't go anywhere yet. This is very much something that needs to be built around and ongoing, and yet it's stuck in these phases. And Devastation, according to the sub-numbering of the Transformers comics, is like issue 22, and that's what it should be. It should be issue 22, and I should have more right after this. You shouldn't sell this to me as Devastation, its own story, because it isn't. Devastation is the culmination, not even the culmination. Devastation is the continuation of everything we've read so far, and with no conclusions to any of it. Not a single plot thread is wrapped up by the end of this. In fact, not a single plot thread has any sort of like second act by the end of this. The end of the Scorponok Hunter thing in Devastation is just Hunter's ready to fight and Scorponok's attacking. That's the end of that. And then you have to wait and go to the next issue to figure out what's happening. And you have to go to the next mini is the thing. Like, this doesn't function as its own mini story as a continuation of the rest of the universe. This is pure and simple pulling everything together and just expecting me to juggle all these balls until someone comes and picks them up and put them in order. So much going on. So much just, I don't know motivations anymore. I don't know standing of who's doing what. I don't know why anyone trusts who anymore. I don't really know why the Decepticon faction revived Starscream to betray Megatron, and then I don't know why Megatron's plan, or Starscream's plan, is to act like he's the good soldier again, and him deactivating Sixshot because Megatron told him how to, and then what would he have done if he didn't know about Galvatron showing up and stopping the Reapers for them? It's just, there's a lot of open threads here. And I know later this is going to be picked up on, and some of it will be explained, and a lot of this I can understand by reading things outside of the story itself, but that shouldn't be the case. It should not be this incomprehensible. You can't read just this. You can't go from Infiltration, Stormbringer, Escalation to Devastation. You can't read the minis like that. You have to read all the spotlights. You have to read all the spotlights, you have to read everything that happens in between this, and then more than that, you have to be able to know every little detail of what's been going on that you'll find on like trivia and notes and stuff within the wiki page. You have to diagram this book at this point. And I don't have Volume 4 yet. I don't have money right now to go out and buy Volume 4. And I feel like by the time I buy Volume 4, I'm going to completely forget what's going on. I can't imagine just jumping back into the middle of this story and going forward. The only way it functions is if I sit back and reread Volumes 1 through 3 and then go to Volume 4. There is just so much going on, and so much of it that I don't understand. I can't even tell you whether this is good or bad. This is just a big, incomprehensible mess. It's easily the worst thing we've had since Megatron Origin. It's a massive step down from Escalation. It's a massive step down from Stormbringer. It's a massive step down from even Infiltration. And at this point, I know Simon Foreman was going to like 3 or 4 more minis, and then all of that got condensed down to like 4 spotlight issues, and so a lot of this is going to get derailed after this, and I guess I'm just kind of preparing for a lot of this to continue to not make sense. So, at this point, I don't know what to say about Devastation. If you've kept up, then don't be like me and like wait to read the next part. Just go out and get the next volume and continue it, because then you'll have more of an idea of what's going on than I will when I buy the next volume months from now and kind of forget important details. If you can, just pull up the wiki page while you're reading this and try and connect the dots as best as you can and as best as they can. Because this story on its own is just a mess. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said. The only thing left to talk about within this particular collection is Spotlight Grimlock and Spotlight Wheelie. Both of which are something I'm going to do separately in a really short video, just covering some of that information. But instead of that, let me just go ahead and talk about that here, because some of that is a continuation, so I won't make a separate video for that. Okay, so Spotlight Grimlock is at the end of Devastation, where the military is like, okay, we lost Ravager, we lost Laserbeak, we have no idea what the hell's going on right now. Use your technology and try to control Grimlock, and they try to wake him up, and they can't, and Grimlock immediately breaks free. And there's a line where he's like, my vocal processor is damaged, so he can't speak, and then he proceeds to speak perfectly fine. And so Grimlock is just lost and has no idea what's going on. And he feels like he's betrayed his team. He's worried about the state of the world. He's scared about like what happens if he tries to jump back into his ship and he discovers that the orbit's decayed and it's not there anymore. Like he's just terrified. So Scorponok shows up and they start a fight. And Scorponok's like, join me. You're on Ultra Magnus's hit list. They're gonna take you out. We need your power. And then in that, Grimlock is able to continue to survive and find a reason to fight because he wants to take Scorponok down. And so he isn't able to defeat him because Scorponok's just had so much time to upgrade himself in the time Grimlock hasn't. So Grimlock takes the chance and warps into what he thinks his ship is in space. And it turns out it's there, but it's mostly damaged and decayed. And from there, he's like, okay, I'm going to find my Dinobot comrades, and I'm going to take out Scorponok. And that's like his whole thing now. At the same time, we go to the next story, which is Wheelie, who you see in the Spotlight Optimus Prime giving a distress beacon that no one follows. And Wheelie is basically a small Autobot scout-type soldier that always wanted to be bigger than that always wanted to do his part to help the war effort. And when they sent him off to do a recon mission, and they took a chance on him, mostly because they had no choice and they were spread thin, Wheelie crash lands on a desert planet. And from there, it's just like his survival story. And it's a really interesting contrast to the stuff we did with Cup, where he doesn't lose his mind, but he starts to lose his sympathy, he starts to lose hope, because every turn that he tries to do something good, something bad happens to him. He tries to communicate with some of the local creatures, and he gets his arm bitten off, and he starts feeling like phantom pains from there. Every attempt he makes to try and make the best of a situation and hope the Autobots come back and rescue him, nothing works out in his favor, to the point where the Decepticons finally land on his ship on the same planet. They both crash land, and it's the Reflector Trio. One of them is dead, and then the other two are stuck on this planet with him. And so he sets up another crash-landed pilot to be chased by the Decepticons so he can take their ship and hopefully fly out of there. But then he feels bad about it, so he decides to go and rescue him. And so, in continuing to do that, they try to repair the ships, and they try to find out a way to get out together. Decepticons attack again, and so he decides to rescue his friend, and they blow up the Reflector Trio. So those characters show up and just die in this issue. And so him and his other friend decide to build basically a life on this planet, because they have no other choice at this point. And it's interesting, and it's a fun survival story. And again, a really good contrast to what happened to Cup, where Cup lost his mind, and here this character is holding on to his sanity. So I highly recommend this. I think both Spotlight Wheelie and Spotlight Grimlock are great. Devastation, not at all. But Spotlight Wheelie and Spotlight Grimlock are really good, and they do continue the story that's been going on so far, so you have to read them. So that is actually the end of the IDW Collection Transformers Volume 3. Eventually, I will come back, hopefully, to do Volume 4. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said, and I'll see you next time.